Hungry old man, I'll give you my Ferrari if you can even start it.
Hungry old man, I'll give you my Ferrari if you can even start it. Ethan Walker's voice thundered through the glass and gold hall. His words carried on laughter sharp enough to cut skin. The red Ferrari gleamed beneath chandeliers, its polished body reflecting the cruel smiles of the crowd that circled like vultures. Phones lit up, flashes sparking as guests in gowns and tuxedos leaned closer, desperate to capture the spectacle. Champagne glasses tilted, muffled laughter echoed. Ethan, the billionaire CEO everyone admired, had turned a luxury exhibition into a theater of mockery, and the trembling figure at the center was no guest of honor, but a hungry old man whose eyes never left the car. But what happened next left everyone in the hall frozen, their laughter swallowed in a silence no one expected. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and don't forget to like this video. Crystal chandeliers glittered above the crowd like frozen fireworks, their light reflecting on the polished surface of a blood-red Ferrari at the center of the room. Waiters glided between clusters of jewel-draped guests, serving champagne that caught the light in golden flashes. Phones hovered in the air, ready to capture whatever spectacle might erupt. This wasn't just an exhibition of luxury cars, it was a theater where power performed itself. And tonight, Ethan Walker was the star. Tall, silver-haired, his tuxedo sculpted to his frame, he commanded the space the way a conductor controls an orchestra. Wherever he moved, laughter followed, sharp and obedient. His voice rolled across the hall, playful yet edged with cruelty, the kind that made people laugh a little louder than they wanted to, just to show they were in on the joke. The Ferrari gleamed like an altar to excess. Its curves drew eyes the way fire draws moths, and near it, standing out like a stain against silk, was the old man. His shirt was frayed, its collar collapsed from years of wear, his shoes were cracked at the seams. He clutched his coat as though it were the last barrier between himself and humiliation. "Look at this." Ethan's laughter cut through the hall, a whip disguised as amusement. He pointed toward the old man, his manicured finger steady, merciless. A hungry stray wandered into my showroom. The crowd erupted, the laughter swelling like a storm tide. Some covered their mouths, others filmed eagerly, thrilled to capture humiliation wrapped in spectacle. The old man didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the Ferrari, as if the jeers were nothing more than static. His hands, though, those weathered hands, tightened briefly against his chest. Ethan stepped closer, reveling in the moment. "Tell me, old man," he said, his smile sharp, "do you even know what this is? This car costs more than everything you've ever touched in your miserable life. It's not a cab you can flag down, it's not a bus seat. This," he tapped the hood, the sound echoing through the microphone system like a gavel, "is a Ferrari." The audience clapped as though he had delivered a punchline. Someone shouted, "Make him wash it." Another chimed in, "He might scratch it with his rags." The cruelty bounced across the room, each joke stacking upon the last. Ethan raised his hand, silencing them theatrically. His grin widened. No, I've got something better. Let's make this interesting." He walked to a glass case where the keys rested, lifted them high so the chandeliers caught the shine, and turned back toward the old man. "If you can start my Ferrari," Ethan declared, voice booming, "it's yours. Take it. Drive it away. I'll hand over the papers right here in front of everyone." A collective gasp followed by delighted laughter. Phones angled closer. Champagne flutes froze mid-air. It was absurd, impossible, designed to humiliate. But then, the old man finally lifted his gaze. His eyes, pale and steady, locked on Ethan's. His lips parted slowly, shaping words that landed like stones in the sudden hush. "I accept." The room held its breath. Ethan blinked, caught off guard for a fraction of a second, before laughter returned to his face. "Oh, this is going to be good," he sneered. And with that, all eyes turned to the old man and the Ferrari, as though the night had just begun. The music softened to a glossy hush, the kind hotels play when they want you to feel expensive. At the edge of the crowd, Chloe, the cleaning lady in a black uniform too plain for the chandeliers, paused with her cart, a rinse of lemon and ammonia riding the air behind her. She watched the old man the way you watch a cliff walker, breath held, knuckles white on the cart's handle. A security earpiece crackled near her shoulder. Jack, broad-shouldered in a suit that fit like a rule, was already weaving through the glitter. "Sir," Jack said to the old man, voice low, professional. "We can take you outside, get you some water." His hand hovered near the man's elbow without touching, respectful, ready. The old man didn't look at Jack. His eyes followed the arc of cold light running along the Ferrari's flank. He raised his chin to the windshield as if listening for something inside the glass. The crowd fed on every second of delay. The suspense tasted like sugar. Up close, his face held more detail than the jeers allowed. A thin scar under the jaw, sun-browned skin, eyes that had once measured things down to the hair's breadth. Ethan flicked his wrist toward Jack. "Let him stay. A bet's a bet," he said, playing generous for the cameras. He touched a microphone clipped to his lapel, voice pouring through hidden speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, New York's glittering night just got brighter. We're about to watch a miracle. Or a mess." Laughter again, obedient and bright. Fernanda slipped through the bodies, her emerald dress sliding like water between shoulders. She lifted her phone, but not like the others. Her camera lingered not on the Ferrari, but on the old man's hands. They were nicked, healed over, the kind of hands that carry memory. She noticed how his fingers mapped the car's lines in the air, the door seam, the perimeter of the hood, the faint rise where the intake kissed the body. He wasn't gawking. He was remembering. Chloe edged closer, silently writing a toppled flute someone had abandoned. "Do you know him?" she whispered to Jack. "No," Jack said, eyes narrowed. "But the car knows him." He didn't know why he'd said it. The words felt true. Ethan slid the keys from their case and spun them once on his finger, like a magician about to make something disappear. He approached the old man slowly, savoring the optics. "What's your name?" he asked. His smile lacquered on. The old man's voice was dry but steady. "Gabriel," he said. "Gabriel Hart." "Gabriel," Ethan repeated, tasting the syllables like they might stain his tongue. "Here are the rules. You get one attempt. If it doesn't start, you walk out quietly and we all enjoy the rest of the evening like civilized people. If it starts," he tilted his head toward the car, letting the unthinkable hang, "then it's a good night to be a miracle." Gabriel's eyes flicked to the key fob, not to the crowd. He extended his hand. The gesture was small, but the room shifted around it, as if gravity itself had nudged. The chandeliers quivered in their chains. Someone cleared their throat. Someone else muttered a prayer dressed up as a joke. Ethan hovered the keys over Gabriel's palm. "One try," he said softly, for Gabriel alone. "Don't embarrass yourself." Gabriel didn't answer. His other hand adjusted the frayed collar of his shirt, as if preparing for a photograph, then fell still. He watched the keys the way a diver studies the surface before breaking it. Click. Metal kissed skin. The keys rested in Gabriel's open hand. He closed his fingers. Not tight, deliberate. He turned toward the Ferrari, his shoulder brushing the air like a door swinging on oiled hinges. Chloe's breath snagged. Jack stepped back without meaning to. Fernanda's phone stayed trained on those hands. Gabriel paused at the driver's door. For a heartbeat, he didn't touch the handle. He listened, truly listened, as if the car were speaking in the tiny ticks of cooling metal and distant bass. Then, with a motion both careful and intimate, he reached for the handle. The hall leaned forward as one body. The door latch clicked, a crisp note in the velvet air. And as Gabriel slid into the leather seat, the room felt the strange certainty that something here wouldn't go the way Ethan had written it. The leather sighed under Gabriel's weight as he settled into the driver's seat. The contrast was jarring, his threadbare shirt against the Ferrari's tan leather, his weathered skin against the polished chrome. It looked like a man from another world had been dropped into this shrine of wealth. The crowd laughed, of course. They couldn't help themselves. The sight was irresistible. "Careful, old man, don't stain the seat," someone shouted. Another voice chimed in. "He probably doesn't even know where the ignition is." The laughter roared louder than the music ever had. Ethan leaned an elbow on the roof of the Ferrari, his cufflinks flashing. He angled his face toward the audience like a performer waiting for applause. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, drawing out each syllable, "our guest of honor seems very comfortable. Perhaps this is the closest he's ever been to actual luxury." The words sliced, deliberate and cruel. The crowd clapped, some whistled. Fernanda lowered her phone for a moment, her expression tightening. To her, it didn't look like comfort on Gabriel's face. It looked like memory. Inside the car, Gabriel placed the key fob gently on his knee. His fingers brushed across the steering wheel, the leather darkened from the oils of countless hands, but still pristine. He didn't smile, didn't wince. His face was a mask of stillness. Yet his fingertips lingered on the stitching like they recognized the seam. Ethan bent lower, his voice pitched for Gabriel, though still caught by the microphones. "Tell me, old man, what's a man like you doing here? Did you wander in hoping for leftovers from the buffet? Or do you clean floors so often you thought you'd try cleaning my tires too?" The laughter sharpened, meaner this time. Chloe's knuckles whitened around her cleaning cloth. Jack's jaw clenched. Security or not, he looked 1 second from stepping forward. Gabriel didn't lift his eyes. His thumb traced the Ferrari logo embossed in the center of the wheel. His lips parted just enough for breath to escape, almost a whisper. "Still the same emblem," he murmured, so low only the closest could hear. Fernanda tilted her head. "What did he just say?" she whispered, pressing record again. Ethan laughed louder, covering the moment. He straightened, spreading his arms wide to the audience. "This is charity in action. Tonight you'll all see me gift my car to a stranger, if miracles happen." He gestured at Gabriel like a magician revealing a rabbit from a hat. "Watch closely. Watch him fail." Phones lifted higher, lights blinking like fireflies. The room vibrated with anticipation, cruel and electric. People leaned over velvet ropes, their laughter now mixed with hunger. The hunger to see a man stumble. Gabriel finally moved. He lifted the keys from his knee, weighed them in his palm, and then slipped them into the ignition slot. The motion was calm, practiced, too practiced. Fernanda caught her breath, zooming in. The hall's laughter began to thin into silence. Something about the way he adjusted the seat, checked the mirror and touched the gear shift. None of it was random. Each gesture carried the weight of repetition, of long-forgotten ritual. And when he placed his hand on the key and closed his eyes, it wasn't the look of a man humiliated. It was the look of someone about to return home. Ethan circled the Ferrari like a ringmaster, measuring the height of his flames. His smile was lacquered on, but a hairline crack ran through it. Fernanda noticed it first, the way his nostrils flared when Gabriel adjusted the mirror by feel, not sight. Cameras drifted closer. The MC had stopped speaking. The string quartet in the corner, confused, let the last note shiver out and die. What remained was the hum of air vents and the collective throb of 100 restless hearts. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan announced, voice pouring silk over steel, "New York thrives on spectacle. So let's raise the stakes." He crouched to the window, meeting Gabriel's profile. "One try, Gabriel Hart. If you start it, my Ferrari is yours. If you don't, you leave without a sound." He lifted the key fob off the wheel and set it back into Gabriel's hand like a chalice. "Agreed?" Gabriel's eyes stayed on the instrument cluster. The needles slept at 0. In the glassy reflection, he could see Ethan's face behind him, rehearsed and gleaming. "Agreed," he said, his voice steady, sanded smooth by years of wind. A rumble went through the crowd, the greedy kind of awe people reserve for auctions where souls are the lot. Jack positioned himself at Ethan's shoulder, trying to look neutral. Chloe hovered at the velvet rope, a rag folded in both hands like a small white flag. "Before we proceed," Ethan added, pivoting to face the audience, "let's make sure our miracle worker doesn't cheat." His smile sharpened. "Pop the hood," he called to one of his attendants. "Let the expert see everything is in perfect condition." 2 men in branded jackets hurried forward, unlatching the panel with practiced clicks. The Ferrari's heart lay exposed, chrome and black, a sculpture of heat and hunger. A man with a lanyard, some kind of collector, leaned in. "Flawless," he said, for the nearest phone mics. "Pristine." Others chimed in, as if to certify the purity of the game. Gabriel didn't turn his head. "Close it," he said softly. "Engines don't like being stared at. They prefer to be heard." A few laughs flickered, confused. Was that a joke? A proverb? Ethan waved the attendants away. The hood came down with a soft, expensive thud. The car seemed to inhale. Ethan hooked his fingers on the window edge. "Tell you what," he said, savoring each word. "Start it and I'll do one better. I'll have my lawyer draft the transfer tonight. Title, keys, insurance, the whole thing. Consider it a contract marriage between man and machine." He winked to the crowd at his own quip. "And if you fail, Gabriel, you'll apologize to everyone in this room for wasting our time." The phones trembled with delight. Someone shouted, "Make him sign something." Another, "Get it in writing." Fernanda stepped forward. "You don't need paperwork to keep your promises," she said clearly, not loud but unmistakable. Her voice drew a ripple of eyes. "You just need witnesses." Ethan's jaw ticked. Then he smiled again, wider, emptier. "Oh, we have witnesses," he purred. "Plenty." Inside the car, Gabriel placed the key in the slot, but he didn't turn it. His left foot found the pedal. He weighed it, not with pressure but with memory, a feather's touch. He adjusted the steering column by a precise notch. His right hand drifted to the center console, hovering, listening. Chloe swallowed. "He knows it," she whispered to Jack. "He knows it like a prayer." "Or a wound," Jack said, eyes fixed. Ethan drummed his manicured fingers on the roof, impatience choreographed for the cameras. "Any day now, Gabriel." Gabriel exhaled, a quiet tide going out. For the first time, he glanced up, past Ethan, past the glitter and glass, to the rafters where the lights burned hot. His gaze lowered to the dash. One whisper, barely air. "Easy, Red." Fernanda's head snapped. "Red?" she mouthed, recording every syllable. Ethan missed it, or pretended to. He spread his arms to the room. "Count us down, New York." Voices rose, a countdown stitched together from 100 throats. 3, 2. Gabriel's fingers tightened on the key, then stopped. He froze, eyes narrowing at the cluster. He reached out, tapped a discreet switch below the column, almost hidden, then another by his knee, a sequence so fast it looked like intuition. 1. Gabriel didn't turn the key. He lifted his hand instead to a small lever near the fuse panel, so minor most owners never noticed it. His thumb pressed, released. A hush detonated through the room. Ethan's smile faltered. "What are you doing?" Gabriel finally looked up at him. Calm, certain, starting with respect. His hand returned to the key. He paused, an inhale, a prayer, a memory, and the part of the crowd that understood machines felt their skin prickle. He turned. The engine stayed asleep. A gasp rippled like a dropped glass. Ethan's grin came roaring back. "Oh, that's a shame." Gabriel reached down again, one final adjustment at the footwell, something no one could see. Then, with a glance to the dash, he breathed, "Now." His hand found the key once more. He twisted. The room braced for either thunder or humiliation, and the Ferrari answered with a single, low, living cough. Not a failure, a heartbeat. The crowd forgot to breathe. Gabriel's eyes didn't move. "Hello," he murmured. Then he turned the key the rest of the way. The night was about to change. The cough of the engine wasn't the failure they expected. It was a breath, the inhale before a roar. The sound hung in the air, a vibration that trembled through marble floors and crystal glassware, then fell into silence. A silence so deep it pressed against the skin, as if the entire hall had been wrapped in velvet. Every camera was raised now, recording. Champagne flutes froze midway to lips. Chloe clutched the edge of her cart, knuckles white. Jack's radio hissed quietly at his side, forgotten. Even Ethan, leaning on the roof with smug certainty, had stopped tapping his fingers. Inside the Ferrari, Gabriel sat still, his weathered hands resting on the wheel like a surgeon about to make the first incision. His thumb brushed the leather once, slow and deliberate, as if reminding the car of something it already knew. Then he adjusted the gear shift into neutral, flicked the ignition switch back and waited. The silence deepened. It wasn't suspense anymore, it was reverence. The crowd leaned closer, but nobody dared speak. The old man had turned the hall into a church and the Ferrari into its altar. Fernanda's camera shook in her hands. She whispered to herself, though the microphone caught it. He's not guessing. He knows. Her eyes flicked from Gabriel's movements to Ethan's face, searching for a crack in the billionaire's mask, and there it was. Just a flicker, a tightening at the jaw. a bead of sweat near the temple. Gabriel exhaled, low and steady. He reached down, pressed the clutch pedal once, held it there. Then, with the patience of a man who had done this ritual thousands of times, he turned the key again. The Ferrari stirred. The sound was soft at first, like a lion stretching in its sleep, then stronger, rumbling through the cavernous hall. A growl deepened into a living roar, a mechanical heartbeat that shook chandeliers and rattled glass. The red beast had woken, not with fury, but with familiarity. The crowd exploded. Shouts, gasps, laughter. Phones flew higher, flashes erupted like fireworks. "No way!" someone screamed. "He did it!" another shouted. Chloe clapped her hands over her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. Jack, despite himself, whispered, "Damn." Ethan's mask cracked wide. For a second, just a second, his eyes widened. His breath caught. He forced a laugh, loud, brittle, snapping like ice under a boot. "Beginner's luck," he declared, raising his arms as if commanding the noise. "Don't clap yet. Let's see if it actually runs." But the Ferrari wasn't running. It was singing. Gabriel's foot pressed the pedal lightly, coaxing the engine to climb, the revs smooth, flawless, like an orchestra following the baton of a master. He let it settle again, purring steady, alive in his control. His lips moved, quiet words, private, as if speaking to an old friend. Fernanda leaned forward, recording. "What's he saying?" she whispered. Gabriel's voice was too low for most, but Chloe, close enough, caught the words. Her heart stumbled. He wasn't boasting, wasn't gloating. He whispered a name. Bella. The Ferrari answered with a sharp, rising growl like recognition. The room erupted into chaos, cheers, disbelief, frantic questions. But at the center, there was no chaos, only an old man, his hands steady on the wheel, and a machine that had just remembered him. Ethan's smile faltered completely, and for the first time all night, the crowd's laughter wasn't with him. The engine's song filled the hall, not loud so much as precise, a ribbon of sound that drew every head and quieted every throat. When Gabriel feathered the throttle, the revs rose in a satin arc, then settled. No hiccup, no hunt, nothing but control. He glanced at the gauges the way a pilot reads stars, oil pressure steady, temperature coming up smooth, idle anchored like a heartbeat that knows its body. He listened with his jaw, with his ribs, with the small bones of his hands. Ethan tried to outsmile the noise. "Cute trick," he said, voice amplified and hollow in the speakers. "Even a homeless man can find a lucky switch." A ripple of laughter came, thinner than before. He leaned down, determined to reclaim the narrative. "Tell us, Gabriel, what did you do? Whisper a prayer? Cross your fingers?" Gabriel didn't answer him. He listened, then tapped the dash with 2 fingers, right above a barely visible seam. "Idle control valve is a hair sticky," he murmured, mostly to the car. "She wants a warmer morning." He turned the wheel a half-inch left and right, feeling for play. "Alignment's a touch feathered on the front right. You've been kissing potholes, Red." The nickname slid out naturally, a private habit. The car responded with a contented purr. A man with a lanyard blinked. How could he tell that?" "By sound," Fernanda said, almost to herself, recording close on Gabriel's face. "And by faith." Ethan straightened, scoffing. "Anybody can make up jargon." Gabriel eased the revs again, listening for a thread in the music. "Fuel mix is a shade rich at cold start," he said quietly. "Your aftermarket tune is compensating for an intake leak you didn't fix, only masked." His hand moved to the center console, hover, don't touch, like a priest's hand near a chalice. "You had the ECU updated recently, not factory, and whoever did it didn't understand the original map." A stir ran through the crowd, murmurs with teeth. One of Ethan's attendants, face paling, shifted his weight. A second man in branded jacket coughed into his fist. Chloe glanced between them, then back to Gabriel, a small smile dawning, pride somehow, on behalf of a stranger. Jack edged closer to Ethan, low voice. "Might be better to end this now, sir." "End it?" Ethan snapped, forgetting his mic. The word ricocheted across the hall. He recovered, pasted on a grin. "We're just getting started." Fernanda stepped to the hood line, careful not to touch. "Sir?" she asked Ethan, polite enough to sting. Could we hear Mr. Hart finish his analysis? Ethan's teeth flashed. Be my guest composer. Gabriel let the engine idle, the sound a clean thread through velvet. He angled his head, listening deeper, and then he did something that seemed like nothing. He reached the tiniest distance beneath the column and flicked a hidden immobilizer bypass, aftermarket, tucked by a paranoid installer. The engine note settled from silk to glass. Whoever wired this switch, he said softly, didn't trust the world, or didn't trust the driver. Ethan's smile froze. Security feature, he said too quickly. Security, Gabriel repeated, as if testing the word's honesty. He cut the engine and the sudden silence rang like a bell. The crowd exhaled all at once. The moment had edges now. Gabriel opened the door and stood, joints careful but not uncertain. His eyes traveled along the Ferrari's body, over the badge, the seam of the hood, the whisper of red under the lights. He rested his palm on the fender for a heartbeat, then withdrew it, a goodbye that wasn't exactly a goodbye. Is it mine now? He asked, not smug, not begging, only even. Ethan laughed, big and brittle. A deal is a deal, he said, the words tasting like glass. Signed, sealed, if you can afford the gas. A few chuckles, nervous. Fernanda's brows knit. She stepped closer to Gabriel, cutting her profile against the car's curve. Sir, she said gently, how did you know the sequence? The switch, the tune, the everything? Gabriel's gaze met hers. The familiarity in it was not arrogance. It was recognition. He lifted his hand, palm up, and turned it slightly. Faint scars tracked the heel, like someone had once pried metal free with these fingers. Because this engine, he said, almost a whisper, wasn't born on a showroom. The room leaned in. It was born in a basement where the lights flickered when it sang. A tremor passed through Ethan's jaw. Fernanda swallowed. Whose basement? Gabriel's eyes shifted past her, beyond the lights and crystal and velvet, to the man who had crafted the night like a stage. Ask him, he said softly, nodding to Ethan. Ask the millionaire CEO who bought the song and forgot the singer. Silence fell again, heavier, tighter, full of air that wouldn't move. And for the first time, Ethan Walker looked like a man who'd heard this engine before, long before tonight. The applause died the way rain dies. One last patter, then hush. Gabriel stood beside the Ferrari with sleeves pushed to the elbow, the tendons in his forearms like old cables. He didn't grandstand. He listened. A mechanic's listening, eyes still, breath shallow, the mind inside the noise. Then he tapped the fender once, not for show but for memory. Open the hood, Fernanda said, voice steady. The attendants hesitated, glancing at Ethan. His nod came late and tight. The hood lifted. Chrome and black geometry gleamed beneath the lights like a cathedral organ. Gabriel didn't crowd it. He leaned in just enough, breathing the faint mix of fuel, rubber, and heat. Aftermarket intake, he murmured. Good brand, bad install. You shaved the gasket to make it fit, so you're pulling a whisper of unmetered air right here. He pointed to a seam near the coupler. That's why the idle hunt's cold. Your tuner fattened the map to hide the leak. A man in a navy suit, collector, judging by his cufflinks shaped like pistons, squinted, then touched where Gabriel indicated. He's right, he said, startled. I can feel the draft. Gabriel's finger moved, precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Heat shields misaligned, rattles at 2,000 RPM. You've been pretending it's character. He shifted his attention to the loom. Harness is zip-tied too close to the header. You'll cook the insulation by summer. One of Ethan's techs bristled. With respect, sir. Respect is why I'm telling you now, Gabriel said without bite. He traced a wire down to a small, tucked switch. And whoever added this immobilizer didn't fuse it properly. If this trips under load, you won't just stall. You'll lose your power steering in the wrong turn and blame the driver. A low murmur rolled through the hall. Phones zoomed tighter. Chloe closed her eyes briefly, as if the words were a prayer for everyone who couldn't afford mistakes. Ethan laughed, brittle. We bring a fortune teller to a car show and suddenly he's an engineer. Fernanda looked up from her screen. He's not guessing. She angled to Jack. Get me a napkin. Jack handed her one. With a borrowed pen she pressed into Gabriel's palm. Could you sketch what you're talking about? Gabriel's hand moved with old certainty. 2 strokes for the intake path, a dot for the leak, a tidy loop for the harness. He didn't rush. He drew the way some men sign their names, practiced, owned. He added a date, years ago, beneath a specific curve of the manifold, his pen hovering like a needle above a vein. Why the date? Fernanda asked. Because that curve wasn't in the early prototypes, Gabriel said. It solved a resonance that sang at exactly 2300 revs. We fixed it in a basement on West 38th. The lights flickered when the engine hit the note. He tapped the curve. I shaped this bend with a heat gun and my own hands. The air sharpened. Even the chandeliers listened. From the back, a grey-bearded guest spoke up. I remember that shop. Walker Innovations funded those tests. His gaze slid to Ethan. Said the team was redundant after the patent filings. Color drained from Ethan's face, then rushed back in angry blotches. Hearsay, he snapped. None of this proves... Proves? Gabriel's voice stayed gentle. Look at the manifold's underside. He nodded to the techs. There's a stamp too faint for photos, GH03, not for glory, for tracking iterations. He didn't move. He didn't need to. The nearest tech swallowed and angled a phone flashlight. A beat, then another. I see it, the tech whispered. The room shifted. Laughter died for good. Curiosity hardened into something else, recognition with teeth. Fernanda lifted her camera toward Ethan. Would you like to say anything? Ethan's smile tried and failed. Yes, he said, voice tight. I'd like to remind everyone this is a private event. But dignity, Fernanda replied, is very public. Gabriel closed the hood with reverence. He faced the crowd at last, not as a beggar, not as a miracle worker, but as a man returning to his name. And the question that filled the room wasn't whether he could start the car. It was what else he could start, now that everyone could see him. The hall felt different now. The sparkle of champagne, the chandeliers, the silk dresses, none of it carried the same weight. The air was heavier, charged with the kind of silence that settles before a verdict. Every eye tracked Gabriel, but it wasn't the gaze of mockery anymore. It was the gaze of witnesses. Fernanda kept her phone steady, catching every angle of Ethan's expression. Mr. Hart, she said carefully, if that stamp is yours, why hasn't the world heard your name? Gabriel's hands folded in front of him. For a moment he seemed smaller, as if bracing for a weight that had crushed him once before. Then he spoke, his voice stripped of showmanship. Because names can be erased, contracts rewritten, promises dissolved when men with suits and lawyers walk in. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some lowered their phones, not wanting to record shame. Others leaned closer, hungry to hear. I was 22 when I walked into that basement on West 38th, Gabriel continued. A kid with calluses, no diploma, only the rhythm of machines in my blood. Walker Innovations called it an apprenticeship program, said we'd be the future of American engines. And for a while it felt true. His eyes dropped to the Ferrari, the shine painting red across his face. We built prototypes from nothing. Nights when the lights went out, we worked by flashlight. When the city flooded, we stayed until morning. We bent pipes with heat guns, hammered mounts by hand, prayed over each gasket, and we stamped our initials, not for ego, but to keep track of which design survived the fire. Fernanda swallowed. And what happened? Gabriel's voice cracked not from weakness but from remembering. The patents came. The investors cheered. And then they said we were redundant. Our contracts ended with signatures we never got to see. The work stayed. The names disappeared. All eyes shifted to Ethan. His smile was gone now, replaced by a fixed, brittle mask. Business evolves, he said flatly. Companies streamline. It wasn't personal. It's always personal when it's your hands, Gabriel answered softly. When your blood and your nights and your youth are poured into a machine, and someone else takes the bow. He touched the hood again, fingers gentle. I didn't want riches. I wanted to be remembered by the work I left behind. Chloe stepped forward from the sidelines, her cleaning rag still in her hand. Remembered, she repeated, voice shaking but clear. Something every working person deserves. Her words landed with a force that silenced even the murmurers. Ethan tried to laugh, but it sounded jagged. This is absurd. You expect us to believe a homeless man is the mind behind Ferrari technology? No, Gabriel said simply. He pointed toward the manifold curve, the initials faint but undeniable. I don't expect you to believe. The car already told you the truth. The room erupted, not with laughter this time, but with voices tangled in shock, questions, disbelief. Some applauded, some shouted. Fernanda's eyes shone as her camera held on Ethan. The mask of control slipped, and for the first time the billionaire looked cornered. The noise in the hall surged like a storm tide, not laughter anymore, but a roar of questions and indignation. Guests leaned over velvet ropes, pressing forward with their phones, their voices. Words like fraud, stolen and exploited floated in the air, whispered at first, then shouted without shame. Ethan raised his hands, trying to reclaim the stage. Enough, he barked, the microphone amplifying the strain in his voice. This is a luxury event, not a circus. Don't let one bitter man rewrite history with tall tales. But his words didn't land. The crowd was no longer laughing with him. They were looking at him as though he were on trial. Fernanda stepped into the cleared space between Ethan and Gabriel, her green dress shimmering under the chandeliers. Her phone was still recording, but her voice was steady, personal. I've been coming to these events for years. I've seen people with money praised for collecting cars they barely understand. Tonight, I saw a man who listened to an engine like it was alive, and I believe him. The hall hushed. Her words carried farther than the microphone, deeper than the glitter. A man in cufflinks nodded. I do too. Me as well, another voice added. One by one, murmurs of agreement rose, spreading through the hall like sparks catching dry grass. Even Chloe, the cleaning lady, set her rag down and spoke with trembling conviction. I see more dignity in that man's hands than in every glass in this room. The effect was seismic. Guests clapped, some even stepping closer to Gabriel, shielding him from the sting of Ethan's presence. Jack, still in his security stance, shifted subtly, no longer aligned with his employer, but standing slightly toward Gabriel's side. Ethan's face darkened. You're all being manipulated, he snapped. A con artist feeding you sob stories. But the crowd didn't move back. Instead, they pressed harder. Show us proof, Ethan, one shouted. Why was his stamp on your car? Another demanded. A woman held her phone high, streaming live. The world's already watching, she called. You can't bury this. Ethan's composure cracked. His laugh was too sharp, his smile too wide. This is ridiculous, he insisted, tugging at his cufflinks like lifelines. You think a washed-up mechanic deserves credit over me? I paid for the patents. I took the risks. I built the empire. No, Gabriel corrected quietly, his voice cutting through the uproar. You built the walls. We built the foundation, and without a foundation, walls crumble. The words hung heavy. The silence afterward was thicker than the applause that followed. Ethan opened his mouth to retort, but Fernanda raised her phone higher. Careful, she said, her voice calm and sharp. Every word you speak now is evidence. The audience erupted. Cheers this time, wild and uncontainable. Ethan staggered back a step, overwhelmed by the noise, by the truth closing in on him. His empire of charm and arrogance was collapsing, one voice at a time. And in the center of it all, Gabriel Hart stood with his back straight, his dignity no longer stolen, but restored by the judgment of the very people who had once laughed at him. The crowd's cheers rolled through the hall, swelling against the crystal walls like a tide that refused to retreat. For the first time all night, Gabriel stood taller, not because he sought attention, but because the weight he had carried for decades was finally lifting. The Ferrari behind him still pulsed with heat, but no one cared about the machine anymore. All eyes were fixed on the man who had built its soul. Ethan raised a trembling hand for silence, his voice cutting through the noise. Enough theatrics. A bet's a bet. The car is his. Let him drive it into the gutter where he belongs. His laugh was jagged, desperate, echoing wrong against the chandeliers. The crowd didn't laugh with him. Their applause faded into a chill, and Fernanda, still filming, asked the question that burned in every heart. Mr. Hart, will you take the Ferrari? Gabriel turned toward the car. His reflection glimmered faintly in the polished paint. A man weathered, worn, but unbroken. He touched the hood lightly, as if laying a hand on a coffin. Then he shook his head. "No," he said simply. The words silenced the hall more effectively than any outburst. "I don't need his car," Gabriel continued, his voice steady, resonant. "I never wanted the trinkets. All I wanted was the dignity that was stripped from me. Tonight, I have it back." He let the words sink in, then turned to Ethan, who stood rigid, pale. "Keep your Ferrari, Mr. Walker. Without respect, it's just painted metal." A thunder of applause shook the hall, real applause, not for spectacle, but for truth. Chloe wiped at her eyes, whispering, "That's what winning looks like." Jack, lips pressed tight, allowed himself a small nod. Ethan's face collapsed into bitterness. "You're a fool," he spat, his mask gone. "You could have walked out of here a millionaire." Gabriel smiled faintly. "And yet I'm walking out richer than you." The words hit harder than any roar of an engine. The crowd erupted, not cruelly this time, but with catharsis, cheers echoing through the vaulted space. Guests lifted their glasses, not for Ethan, but for Gabriel. Fernanda lowered her phone, eyes shining with tears she didn't bother to hide. Reporters already composing headlines whispered phrases, secret revealed, shocking truth. What happened next shocked everyone. Ethan tried to shout above them, but the tide of voices drowned him. His empire of arrogance collapsed in real time, the moment etched into 100 recordings already streaming to the world. Gabriel turned away from the Ferrari, away from Ethan, and started toward the exit. The crowd parted for him, some reaching out to shake his hand, some simply bowing their heads in respect. He moved slowly, not out of weakness, but out of choice, so the moment would last. As he reached the doors, Fernanda called after him. "What will you do now?" Gabriel paused. The weight of the question hung in the glittering silence. Then he looked back, a faint smile ghosting across his face. "I'll build again," he said. The doors opened. He stepped into the cool night of New York, head high, the city lights reflecting in his eyes like promises yet to be kept. Inside, Ethan Walker stood alone beside the Ferrari, his reflection warped in the red paint, mocked not by words but by silence. And the crowd's applause followed Gabriel into the dark, a song louder than any engine. The hall emptied long after the lights dimmed, but the echoes of that night remained. A Ferrari might shine under chandeliers, but it was dignity that truly lit the room. Gabriel walked out with no keys in his pocket, yet he carried something far more valuable: his name, his truth, his worth restored before the very people who once laughed at him. This story reminds us that no fortune, no empire, no glittering stage makes one person greater than another. Possessions fade, but respect endures. And sometimes it only takes one moment of courage to remind the world of that truth. If you've ever faced humiliation, if you've ever been underestimated or pushed aside, let Gabriel's story be a light for you. Share with us in the comments if you've lived something similar, or if there was a moment when you had to stand tall against arrogance. Your story may give someone else the strength they need, because in the end, we are all equal, no richer, no poorer in dignity. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heartfelt story. Tell us in the comments what part moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of dignity and family. And above all, thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul. Before you go, watch the story I'll leave here on the left. I'm sure it will also move you and make you reflect.